We welcome Justin Hopkins of ScoopDuck, and it's been a very busy weekend for Justin. On Saturday, commitment from Dillon Gabriel, late of Oklahoma, late of UCF, now headed to Oregon, which, by the way, was the school he wanted to go to in the first place, Justin. He was going to go sign. All those Hawaii guys wanted to play for Oregon because of Marcus Mariota.
Yeah. No, and Dillon Gabriel, I think it made it well known that he wanted, this is the way he gets to end his career as he wants, right? He's more than likely going to compete, or be in the Heisman conversation, hopefully. And he gets to finish it at Oregon where he wanted to go all along. Pretty fun. This is what makes college football fun, is these little stories like this.
And wearing Marcus Mariota's number. Like that.
Yeah.
It is amazing because he's such an influence on all those QBs that came out of Hawaii. And I'd imagine Oregon's a special place to all of them for that reason.
Yeah, he really did kind of pave the way, his success. And then you look at Marcus Mariota, the person, and everybody realizes, wow, this is a really awesome dude. He's just such a good person to his core, and he grew up that way. So I think a lot of these young men look up to him because of the person he is on the field, success he had at Oregon. And then man, this guy maybe hasn't had the NFL career that you'd hope for, but shoot, there isn't anybody in the world that doesn't root for Marcus Mariota because he's such a great guy.
Well, let's talk about Dillon Gabriel in this offense. So this is a little bit different than when Bo Nix got there, because Bo Nix got there, Kenny Dillingham was the OC. He and Kenny had worked together at Auburn before. They both knew each other pretty well. This is Will Stein and Dillon Gabriel, who don't have a history together. Gabriel, when he went to Oklahoma, was playing for his UCF OC. So This is a little bit new for him, but how does he fit into the offense they run?
Yeah, I think this offense sets up any quarterback for success if they understand the playbook, if they understand where everybody's supposed to be. I think that's what made Bo Nix just so efficient and made so few mistakes. He knew where every receiver was going to be. So he's making read one, read two, and all of a sudden, it's not there. I'll hit my check down, I haven't even looked at yet, but I know he's over here. Yeah. And I think that's what Will Stein's offense really does. It gives you options and almost always has something that's available to you if you don't force it. So, Bo Nix threw 2 interceptions this year, really only threw 1, but he did get, credited for a second. And I think that's what Dillon Gabriel has to do. Take what's there, okay? Don't try and push the ball, force it into these tight windows. It doesn't have to go downfield all the time. We know he's got an arm. I think the one thing he'll bring that maybe Oregon didn't utilize with Bo Nix, probably because of depth concerns, is the legs. Dillon Gabriel could run. I think we'll see that a little bit more in this offense. But, I know but you look at this Oregon offense, and as efficient as it was this year, there's no reason to change much.
No, and that's the thing. You've got a guy who has, similar ability to run to Bo Nix and has been known as a high-volume, very accurate, efficient passer throughout his time in college, which that's what Bo Nix was at Oregon. That's not what Bo Nix was at Auburn. So, we already know Dillon Gabriel can be that because he's been that at Oklahoma. Yeah,
it's almost like, Oregon and Dan Lanning very early, of course, ran the lab test and said, well, let's take a high volume guy, pretty decent completion percentage and see if we can work him into the offense. And of course, the Bo Nix experiment worked marvelously. And you look at Dillon Gabriel and his experience and what he's done at UCF and what he's done at Oklahoma and just his completion percentage, over 100 passing touchdowns, over 14,000 yards. You think, well, this is kind of the Bo Nix experiment reincarnated. It worked really well. Let's do it again. So, and I think Gabriel comes in even more polished than Bo Nix did when he transferred to Oregon 2 years ago.
So Gabriel commits on Saturday. Very quickly, there's a very cryptic post from Ty Thompson, who was the backup at Oregon under, when Bo Nix was there, a 5-star prospect. He actually was at Oregon before Bo Nix got there. And clearly it looks like, okay, I'm not getting the starting job. It shows him walking away past a row of Oregon helmets. And then on Sunday, he tells Pete Thamel from ESPN he is entering the transfer portal. So what was Ty Thompson's Oregon career like, and where do you think he's going to be looking at going?
Yeah, just to answer the first part, his career, he's the the guy everybody rooted for, right? He'd get out there and you'd want to see him play, and he'd make mistakes. And a lot of fans would say, okay, those weren't great mistakes, but Ty just needs more time. And I think because he stuck with the transition from Mario to Lanning, and Dillingham left, and you've got Will Stein in here, and like you said, Bo Nix came in. He's just been around the program a long time, and he's a pretty quiet guy, but always he's kept his nose clean, been a great team leader. Just a lot of fans love him, and it's the hard truth of college football, right? It's, with the transfer portal being created to help student athletes maybe find that greener pasture, it's also opened the doorway for it to be a business for coaches. They've got to win. And if these guys haven't produced in a certain amount of time, it's time to kind of have that conversation. And so for Ty, I guess to answer the second part, I don't really know where he goes because his body of work is just so unfinished, right? You don't know, like, he's a 5-star, but so far, what's he done at the collegiate level? Not a whole heck of a lot. Played some mop time and some cleanup time, and it hasn't always been the best, but you just kind of wonder, he's probably not getting a ton of reps. So if you make him the guy and you work on developing him, can he be that? I would immediately look at Kenny Dillingham at ASU.
At Arizona State, which is where Ty is from. Ty is from Gilbert, Arizona, which is suburban Phoenix. So that's exactly what I was thinking, is if Kenny liked coaching him the year he coached him, that's an easy fit.
And I heard from sources while Kenny was here in that year that they just felt that to that point, Ty hadn't gotten a lot of development from previous coaches. And so they kind of felt like, okay, yeah, here's a guy who's been in the program a year or two, but is very much at a freshman level still from that standpoint because he just hasn't had the time to develop. So I think if you're, Kenny Dillingham, you maybe have I know we'll get into it, the Dante Moore talk with Ty. You say, hey, maybe I don't make you the starter this year, but come in and maybe in 2 years you're the guy. I don't know.
So you mentioned Dante Moore, who is one of the more interesting people in the transfer portal. So for those who don't know, we'll do the whole history. Dante Moore was a 5-star quarterback from Detroit. He was originally committed to Oregon. He then flipped to UCLA on signing day. He played some at UCLA this year, and now is back in the portal. And Michigan's a possibility right by home.
Yep.
Oregon's a possibility where he was originally committed. But in both cases, there's a veteran quarterback in the way, and he seems perfectly cool with that.
Unique is the word to use here, right? Because this is not typical of a quarterback going into the transport, especially somebody that's basically going to have every Power 5 school chasing him like Dante Moore does. And it really makes you maybe appreciate the level-headedness of his family, of who he's getting his advice from. Like, hey, maybe sitting for a year isn't bad. Okay, going and learning from a Dillon Gabriel, McCarthy, whoever, you're going to go learn from an experienced guy. And it's a unique way. And you look at kind of looking back and you think, man, Dan Lanning might land Dillon Gabriel and Dante Moore in the same transfer period. That's unreal. And I do think that there's a little bit of a hint here that the Ty Thompson move really opens that door for Dante Moore.
Well, and the Dante Moore thing is very interesting because whether he winds up at Oregon or Michigan and winds up being the starter there as a third-year college player, that's kind of what would have happened had he signed with one of those schools out of high school.
Yeah.
But he did, it felt like the flip to UCLA was a chance to play because they weren't sure what they wanted. They had Ethan Garbers and Colin Schlee, and it looked like there was a chance, and he did get a chance to play. And I think what he learned was he may not be quite ready yet.
Yeah, I think I've been around because Chip Kelly was here at Oregon, and I've met him personally and talked to him, and he's always the smartest guy in the room. He really, like, you talk X's and O's on offense with Chip, and you're just like, I mean, and so if I was a quarterback and I was Dante Moore and Chip Kelly sat down and said, hey, here's what I'm going to do with you, and here's how the offense, you're like, wow, that I could do that. I could be successful there. And so I see that. I'm not saying he sold him a raw bill of goods. We all still kind of envision Chip Kelly, the offensive mastermind, but I think maybe that window has passed Chip a little bit, and others have caught up to that style of offense, at least from a defensive standpoint. I think if you're Dante Moore, you go back to the drawing board, you're looking at Oregon, you're looking at Michigan, you said, hey, they had a guy with a ton of success in an offense that works. I could learn that, and I could be that guy.
Yeah, it's interesting because usually with the 5-star QB, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go find where I can play. and that's it. And so this is a little different take on that. But let's talk about the 2023 Oregon team. Obviously, things did not end the way they wanted to in the Pac-12 championship game, but they've got one more game. They've got the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. And it sounds like one very important outgoing player has decided he will play in this game.
Yeah, we've talked about Bo Nix already, and there's been a ton of talk about Bo Nix being in that Heisman Trophy presentation, a finalist there. But what kind of got swept under the rug is the fact that he's going to play in the Fiesta Bowl. He's, announced he'll come back and that he'll play. And it's just like, I don't know about you, but I love it. I mean, I understand why these guys make these business decisions and don't play them and get ready for the NFL. I totally get it. But it's refreshing, and I absolutely love it when somebody like Bo Nix does. And I think that this is something Dan Lanning has said, hey, guys, look, didn't get the matchup we wanted, didn't make the playoffs like we wanted, but let's go out there and let's kick the crap out of Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl. And I believe he's that type of competitor, and I think that that's what he wants to do to kind of set the tone for this offseason. Again, having somebody like Bo Nix in your program is so valuable for what he leaves behind, the culture that he leaves behind. And I think, Dan Lanning's really trying to capitalize on that.
Well, Kyrie Jackson's announced he's going to opt out the cornerback, but I would imagine there's some guys that'll think about playing just because Bo Nix is playing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Troy Franklin, who hasn't announced his intent or his decision yet on that. Terrence Ferguson, the tight end, could go both ways, is looking at the NFL, looking towards returning. Those are the guys that whatever decision they make, you might get them back to play. Hey, I want to play. Let's run it back one more time, Bo. I'd love to play with you one more time. So I think it could be kind of the cherry on top of the cake for what has been. I've done this a long time in covering Oregon specifically, and just the way Bo Nix carried himself and came in and really just revitalized this program on and off the field. Such a tremendous young man off the field. He's one of those guys you just gravitate to, and I love to see that it's kind of going to end this way for him. I'd love to see him win a Heisman, but this will still be fun.
Yeah, if he can go out a winner and have fun with his teammates, and you're right, he did, because that Mario leaving could have been such a crippling moment for the program. And I know everybody was scared because it did feel like, okay, another coach is leaving, but then you get Dan Lanning, Bo Nix comes in and really settles things down and kind of raises the level of play offensively to back what you guys in Eugene are used to watching. And it does feel like Oregon is a very sustainable program from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fork in the road moment. And you as a fans, I know that they're looking back and saying, oh, I'm glad Mario left. I'm glad. You hear him say that. But at the time, everybody was scared to death, like Mario's leaving. Here's a fork in the road for Oregon. Which way are they going to go? Are they going to kind of go back to mediocrity, or are they going to take the next level? And then next thing you know, the guy that's showing up is, barely 30 years old and never been a head coach of a team before. So there's a lot of questions. Turns out he's really good at this. And it's been, like you said, Dan Lanning has done such a tremendous job identifying holes in the transfer portal and fixing them. Bo Nix is a perfect example of that. There's been Jordan Birch is another one, Kyrie Jackson, list goes on. And he has built a roster that will be able to compete year in and year out with a combination of portal additions and effective high school recruiting as well.
Well, and that's what's interesting so far. Other than Dillon Gabriel, it's a lot of Oregon players going out because they weren't playing very much. The question now is, where is Dan Lanning going to go in the portal to spot recruit, to fill in holes? Oregon comes up whenever there's a big person in the portal because they've got a good collective. They're very organized on that front. Where do you see him targeting position-wise?
So, a quarterback was going to be a big one, and it looks like that's at least halfway out of the way, if not all the way. You could just get Dillon Gabriel and be done. I think the next biggest one is safety. I think Oregon's got some concerns there at safety, and you can immediately point to that Pac-12 championship game. Washington was always a bad matchup for Oregon because their strong suits on offense, was Oregon's weaknesses on defense. So I think safety, you look for a body or two there. Depending on what Troy Franklin does, I assume he's going to the NFL. I think you need a couple of experienced guys there at wide receiver. I do believe they'll get Tez Johnson back. I do believe they'll get Trayshawn Holden back. Those are big wins for Dan Lanning to bring both those guys back, but you could use a little bit more help there. And then, of course, along with Dillon Gabriel visiting, Oregon brought in Walter Nolan, the number one player in the transfer portal, defensive lineman. here's the deal as far as Dan Lanning goes in defensive lineman. He's always going to recruit him because he loves him. So Oregon's going to be in the game with those guys. And that's pretty much most of the needs. I've said this elsewhere, but it's going to be quality, not quantity for the transfer portal this year.
Well, there's only one Walter Nolan type in the portal right now. Maybe another one jumps in at some point, but there's only one like him right now. And Oregon does have to replace some D linemen who are, 6th and 7th year guys who, as great as they were, can't come back.
Yeah. Yeah. You do have some holes there. I don't think he needs a ton of guys, but yeah, somebody to steady the ship more so in the interior of that defensive line versus the edges. And Walter Nolan's a really good replacement.
Well, we shall see. Division Street, the collective affiliated with Oregon, maybe we're cut out for you on that one. So, J-Hop, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.